Hello everybody. Today we'll tackle a challenge worthy of a Primarch, painting 3 faces, one in 5 minutes, another in 30, and then finally one glorious hour-long masterpiece. The goal? To show you that you can get battlefield-ready results quickly, while also proving that investing extra time can produce some stunning results fit for a display case. For the first face, we're going to keep it simple. A base coat, a wash, a few highlights. Perfect for beginners or those cranking out an army for tabletop glory. Fair warning, for this one, my camera decided to rebel. During this, just the first face, the rest, it cooperated, so bear with me. So let's start with our 5-minute face. We're going to base coat with Kislev Flesh. Pro tip when doing this, work over a white or gray primer. Going over black is going to take at least 3 coats, and nobody's got time for that when the Tyranid Swarm is knocking on your door. Once that base coat's dry, it's time to douse our model in Reikland Flesh Shade. Be a little judicious here. Think like a tech priest rationing your sacred machine oil. Add a little at a time, guide it to your eye sockets, cheeks, and lips where shadows would naturally fall. With the wash dry, it's time to bring back some highlights. For this, we're going to go back to our Kislev Flesh, and we're going to hit the brow line, nose, cheeks, and forehead. Step is nice, quick, and dirty, perfect for a quick paint job. For the hair, we're keeping it simple. Base coat with XV88. For Games Workshop models, they typically don't get a whole lot of detail in the hair. This is both a blessing and a curse. For these quick paint jobs, it'll make it nice and simple. We just do this, add a little bit of texture, and then we've got our hair all set. Go ahead and follow your XV88 up with a light wash of Agrex Earthshade. Again, go ahead and lightly guide this into the recesses to avoid muddying up our hair details. And finally, we're going to add some highlights back to our hair, going back once again to XV88. We're going to focus on the edges and the hairline to make it pop. And there we have it. Really quick 5-minute head, 4 paints used, nothing crazy. This is perfect for getting your army on the table without sacrificing too much of your soul to the painting gods. But if you're ready to level this up, stick with me for the 30-minute face. And onto our 30-minute face. For this one, we're going to go ahead and skip the wash entirely and start with a Bugman's Glow undertone. This rich and warm tone is going to lay the groundwork for a more polished and refined look, sans wash. Next, we're going to mix Bugman's Glow and Kislev Flesh about 50-50. This is going to be for our first layer, and for this we're going to cover about 90% of the face, leaving Bugman's Glow only in the deepest recesses. Think your eye sockets, cheek hollows, that sort of thing. This step starts to build depth without jumping too quickly between tones. It's going to keep us from having to do glazes and really eat up a lot of time that way. Instead, just subtle shifts in color as we move up in highlight. When painting faces, it's important to put your highlights in the right spots, lest you end up somewhere living in the uncanny valley. Essentially, it looks close to being human, but is certainly not human. It tricks the viewer's eyes and can lead to a severe loss of realism. Instead, focus on highlighting your cheekbones, brow lines, nose, forehead, chin, and the top of our head to maintain our realistic look. Now it's time for pure Kislev Flesh. Once again, we're going to work in smaller and smaller quantities and not really need to shade and bring colors in together because of our small color jumps. For this, we're going to cover about 60% of our face, targeting the raised areas like the brows, cheek, nose, chin, and of course, that shining and glorious bald head of his. Remember to go ahead and thin your paints just a little bit so the transitions smooth out. And to push our highlights just a little bit further, we're going to mix Kislev Flesh and Screaming Skull at a 1-to-1 ratio. Thin it down just a bit more than before, and focus on the upturned surfaces, tops of the cheekbones, the brow ridge, the nose, and then basically one stripe up the middle of his bald head, just to give a nice shining appearance. Continue to push our highlights. Go ahead and then add about 1 to 3 of Kislev to Screaming Skull this time, targeting a smaller area than the last time, probably about 20 to 30% of our face. For the final highlight, we're going to use pure Screaming Skull, delicately applied to the highest points, just enough to create sharp contrast without overpowering the smoother transitions below. And since we're giving this face a little bit of extra love, let's go ahead and paint the eyes. A lot of people find this really tricky, and it is. Realistically, you need a really sharp tip brush, and that's the best advice I can really give you. So a quick pass is going to be gray sear, and that's going to do our trick for us. Make sure to pull the brush towards you to maintain control. It's much easier to do this than trying to dot the paint on. And then for the pupil, we're going to use a tiny dot of Black Templar contrast. The flow of this is going to make it come off really easily and get right into the spot that we need it. We're keeping the colors on all 3 faces consistent, so for all of these we're going to do dark silver with a wash of Nuln Oil. For the lens, go ahead and start with Moot Green, covering about 75% of the surface and leaving the lower quarter black. To set up our final highlight for the lens, go ahead and just add a small dot of white scar at the top right corner for the highlight. We're going to go ahead and finish this off with Gauss Green from the Army Painter over the white, and boom, a glowing lens fit for the battlefield. And here we have our 30-minute face. As you can see, the smoother blends and sharper highlights really neaten our model up and elevate this while still being achievable for an army-wide standard. Now, let's go all in for the 1-hour face. It's also a good opportunity to remind you, if you are not subscribed and would like to do so, would really appreciate it. Alright, on to the next face. For this final 1-hour long face, we're really focusing on contrast. This time, we're going to start with Zaria's purple. Going to seem a little bit weird, but trust me, it's going to really pay off in the end when you see the contrast between this and the kind of yellowy overtones. Next, go ahead and layer Bugman's Glow over all but the deepest recesses. This step begins to create that smooth transition from shadow to skin. Follow the same step that we had done from the 30-minute face. Go ahead and mix Bugman's Glow and Kislev Flesh 1-to-1 and then thin it to a heavy glaze. This is going to be about 2 parts water to about 1 part paint. Go ahead and layer this on gradually. Wherever you start your brush stroke is going to be the least amount of paint left, and then pull it towards the brightest points where it's going to deposit the most paint. This is going to be areas like the cheekbones, forehead, brow line, and nose. This took me about 4 passes to really get the coverage and opacity I wanted. So patience is really key here, but this is going to get super subtle transitions, and it's all going to blend together really, really nicely by the end of it. Now we're ready for pure Kislev Flesh. Since we're working for glazes with this one, we don't really have to worry about mixing the 1-to-1 mixes for the most part. We're all just going to be one continuous tone. So as you add more glaze, you're going to slowly tint the layers below it. So this allows us just to do pure Kislev. The warm undertone of this one really contrasts beautifully against our purple base. You can really see it sitting in the recesses and bringing it up to a bright yellow at the top. As before, we're going to target the raised areas, focusing on the strong highlights to create that striking depth, focusing on about the top 60% of the model. That's going to, once again, brow lines, nose, chin, that sort of thing. And since we're keeping all of these faces in the same basic theme and tone, we're going to begin adding in Screaming Skull. Unlike the 30-minute face, we're working in glazes, like I said, so ignore the 50-50 mix, go straight to Screaming Skull, and we're going to do a few passes of glazing with this to achieve our desired effect. This is going to really bring out the brightness of our skin, not so much working on the vibrancy, but the actual brightness is really going to jump here. So focus this specifically on the bridge of the nose and the eyebrow line. And for the eyes on this one, we're going to follow the same method as before. So grace here for the whites, and then a dot of black Templar contrast for our pupils. For our hair, we're going to start with a Rhinox hide base coat. It's going to establish this nice dark tone in the bottom. Then to highlight, we're going to mix in about 50-50 for XV88. For this, a scraggly brush is going to work best, as this is going to give us thin lines in a semi-random pattern that's going to give our hair some texture. As we talked about before, GW models don't really have a whole lot of texture on their hair. Normally it's a flat surface, so it's up to the painter to really define our shapes and give it a little bit of life and vibrancy to it. And with that, we've completed our 1 hour face. This technique I think is ideal for heroes and captains. I wouldn't recommend it for your base troops, or you're probably never going to finish your army. But the heroes and captains really deserve that extra little bit of attention. There we go. That's 3 faces, 3 techniques, and 3 very different levels of detail and time investment. If you enjoyed this guide, make sure to drop a comment, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. We actually just hit 1,000 subscribers, and I can't wait to keep growing with you all. Until next time, I will catch you later. Have a good one.